climate change is such this big challenge, there is a desire to have a big idea that can just solve it all. In reality, there's so many different situations, so many different contexts throughout the world that there isn't going to be just one big idea.
There are a lot of dimensions to how a low-carbon future will ultimately unfold, and it's going to be different everywhere because there's different comparative advantages everywhere.
We're going to need a mix of solutions, and it's not going to be one-size-fits-all. Different regions need the ability to make decisions about how they want to produce energy and use energy that kind of works for them given their own history and geography.
So I think it's very important to recognize that people have made the commitments, countries have made the commitments, but the pathway they take, the policy framework that they adopt, the technologies they adopt are going to be different, and we need to give room for that to happen.
Clean energy transitions can look very different depending on where it is. And they should look different because every place is different. We're at an exciting moment because policy is beginning to align, and increasingly we have these finance mechanisms that make clean energy technologies more accessible. But one thing that I think is being left out is what it actually takes to deploy clean energy technologies at specific local levels. Some of the considerations in deploying clean energy technologies include what's just physically feasible in a place. What natural resources do they get? Is it a sunny location? Is it a windy location? Are there geothermal resources? Is there the potential for hydropower?
In the United States, you're talking about the regional, it's very different, right? If you're in Arizona or California and all that, you get more sun, whereas if you're in Minnesota and other places, you don't get as much.
It really is about the resource that's in place. That's the first box to check, and then you can start worrying about other dimensions.
We tend to focus so much on the big story and the metrics and where we need to go, which is incredibly important. But sometimes that ignores what the local context is.
You can't just put a wind farm in on a marsh, for example, because that will not be good for wildlife. So we have to consider ecosystems, we have to consider wildlife, we have to consider what that community values.
So when you kind of traverse the country, you realize very quickly that you can't just throw a blanket over the United States and say everybody shall do X, because it's not going to work.
Some of the debates that are happening are perhaps reflective of the public sentiment on this. There are ideas that are at the ends of the spectrum, and there are ideas in the middle.
We're very much shaped by the collection of our own experiences. Every day when we wake up, we have a set of things that we do on a day-to-day basis and a set of things that we see on a day-to-day basis, and that very much shapes our view of the world. What we sometimes fail to realize is there are people all over the world that are doing the exact same thing, and they see different things, and they're influenced by different things. And so their reality, in a lot of ways, is very different than the reality we think exists. So it's important to understand that if we want to argue for a particular solution in the United States, it's not necessarily going to be the same as a solution that might be effective in India or in China or in Indonesia.
In Switzerland, hydropower is already there. It's like 60% of the electricity. For them to become zero carbon, it's much easier than in the United States. And whereas in India, for example, 60+% of the electricity is produced by coal today. And to transition to zero carbon, the pathway India takes is going to be different from the United States or Japan or Switzerland for that matter.
If we put it crudely, there's a part of the world that's already wealthy and already using a lot of energy and already emitting a lot. So for the rich world, the challenge is to decarbonize their energy systems. Then you've got another part of the world, about half of humanity, that doesn't have enough energy. Now the challenge in those countries is different. They don't need to decarbonize. What they need to do is build energy systems And so while there's an interest and a need to do that as green as possible, the priority is not decarbonization. So the challenge globally right now is how do we balance this need for development and higher incomes and higher energy use with a greener world? And what kind of carbon space do we have for developing regions between now and, say, 2050?
We'll need to help these developing countries by providing additional financing, additional support, additional technology and resources so that they are also on the path. And so that together there's a combined initiative, a collaboration between industrialized and lesser industrialized countries to all track toward a lower carbon future.
So right now what it takes is aligning the people that are super smart with finance and figuring out what kind of mechanisms we need, joining together with those technology providers, and getting the clear market signals we need from policy, whether that be local policy in different countries that can get on board, or that be policy within countries to create the markets in order to have the technologies we need that can be disseminated throughout the world.
One of the things that also comes into play when we think about dealing with concerns related to climate, and too often this is left out of the discussion, we have to think about things like urban planning and infrastructure resilience. These are vital.
We're at a moment at which we can re-envision the way our cities and other built environment spaces are built. Everything from infrastructure, environmental restoration, we can improve local food systems, addressing these hyperlocal impacts to climate change, and really working to ensure that the communities who are most impacted are able to develop and to implement the solutions.
I truly believe you need local champions. Sometimes just an individual person that sees the potential of something like needing new infrastructure and working with the local government. Most often, I think that it works well with community organizations or organizations that work on the local levels, that are on the ground, that know how the community operates.
If we're going to get to a place of greater, climate resilience and get to a point at which, all communities are thriving and not just surviving, this has to be a household conversation.
There's an old saying, it's think globally, act locally, and that's kind of the point, really. If you are addressing policy at a local level with global objectives in mind, there is, I would argue, a higher likelihood of being successful in affecting change. So it's important that we put our heads around the scale and scope of the problem and begin to address things at a local level so that we can actually achieve global outcomes.